Hello and welcome to week 4. This class is going by pretty quick, so I'm glad everybody's keeping up, and I'm glad everybody is getting the assignments accomplished. So thank you for that. And this week we're going to be talking about existential theory. And when we talk about existential theory, I always think of Viktor Frankl. That's kind of, um, in my opinion, the guru of existential man's search for meaning. That's one of the kind of the most widely read publication or book, which even if in the world of non-psychology, a lot of people read it. So it's kind of transcends the field. And Royal May, another big one. I know the book talked about several, but since this is an introductory course, I certainly don't want to overwhelm you. So, you know, um, I mean, if when you think of existential, Frankel and Royal May, those are kind of the two big shots. Um, and I, you know, with existential, I guess I could talk all day about it, but I won't because I know we have many theories to cover. Um, in my view, as an existentialist, I think what sets it apart from, let's say, Adler or Freud is that this is very philosophical based. When we go back to Nietzsche and we go back to some of the other um, uh, experts in the philosophy, they always ask the question of kind of the why. So, why am I here? What is my role in this world? Why am I suffering? What is this suffering telling me? How can I make meaning from this suffering? So, I guess to put it in general terms, I in what's so powerful about the existential theory is that it is always asking the whys. And if you go on and read The Man's Search for Meaning, Viktor Frankl goes into detail about how he was able to persevere the atrocities, the concentration camps, the murdering of his families, while others weren't. There was the survivors, and past the years, a lot of the survivors suffered. They suffered tremendously, and as expected, a lot of them, um, through that suffering, went into a lot of crisis. And Viktor Frankl talks about what that crisis looks like. So, as I'm just going to go through some of the key concepts in existential just so that I want everybody to be aware of them. I know it's such a big theory and it's such a big philosophy. There's a lot of, key people, and there's a lot of almost debate because the theory, yes, asks the why, asks um, the questions of meaningful life, and they're saying that people that go through um, the mental, the depression, the anxiety, they're saying that a lot of that is because it's their life doesn't have the meaning, and part of kind of the intervention is to create meaning, um, so that they can have a purpose. Um, so the Corey chapter talks about anxiety, and angst, which is kind of the German word for dread and anxiety. Um, a lot of the existential philosophers, theorists were from Germany. So a lot of that publications are in Germany, are in German, I'm sorry. So be sure to know how anxiety, angst kind of results in the potential client not having clear guidelines and dreading that um, that future, not really knowing what's next, and that's causing that anxiety. Yeah, I mean, I can personally share that working a lot with um, immigrant populations, very, very high anxiety because they don't know what can happen. They're kind of living um, in a very anxiety driven world, and there's a lot of questions that they ask. Can I go to the store? Can I go to my job? Will I be able to take care of my family? Will I be able to send my family in my country of origin the money that I want to share for them? And so, um, for me as an existentialist, I work with that, and I saw that. And I think what's very powerful about this theory is that we're not, or at least an existential counselor is not here to rescue them. I'm not here to tell them, oh, here's some money to send to your family. I'm here to let them know, okay, right now there's a lot of chaos, there's a lot of uncertainty, but how can we create this meaning from this? How can we go beyond this uncertainty, and how can we create some coping mechanisms so that you are able to deal with this stress and you are able to deal with um, such an uncertain world? And when I think about it, I really can't think of any certain things in my life. I mean, even when I think of my family, there's no guarantee that they're going to be here tomorrow. Um, so part of the intervention as an existential is to really analyze, to really look at the dimensions of what Frankl calls the human existence. And you really want to get into their world. And I know that world is subjective and it has many dimensions, the spiritual, um, the social, kind of their their philosophy. So to a certain extent, I know we talked about Dr. Rogers, and to a certain extent, we use some of that person-centered, obviously the core conditions. Um, I mean, we have to use those to really get into that um, world of the client and to really get a sense of where are they coming from, what does their world look like, and how authentic is it? Um, are they living in a way that isn't authentic because they're so busy trying to cope with things that they're really kind of lying to themselves. So those questions I've asked plenty of times, um, because when we talk about, mm, I guess Dr. Rogers called it phases. Um, in existentialism, we call it the existential guilt. So things like evading, um, not going through commitments, those things kind of makes that anxiety go high. So part of an existential intervention is to do an analysis and to really get into their world. And another thing that I want to mention is what an existential we call existential neurosis. So that is the anxiety, despair, all those feelings, the depression, all that that is involved in living in kind of like a fake lifestyle, an inauthentic lifestyle. And part of that is going through an analysis and really creating awareness. Part of an intervention is to look at what this lifestyle or what these choices are getting at. So the Corey book mentioned the existential tradition, and that is kind of creating a certain awareness and increasing the recognition. So when we talk about um, existential tradition, we're trying to seek a balance. So of course we can't be 100% authentic. We have to live in a society with kind of different faces. We part of living in a society is lying, but there has to be a certain balance. And when we talk about anxiety, depression, the big two, we're really talking about somebody that is not balanced and living in kind of what the Corey mentioned, the existential vacuum. So kind of that emptiness, hollowness, that meaningless for the students that are in or that are going the school counseling route. That is a big thing right now in the schools, and even at the elementary level. I see it daily. A lot of the students are that I work with. A lot of them are telling me, I just don't enjoy school. I don't enjoy going home. I just don't enjoy life. So part of that um, intervention is figuring out what is, what is this neurosis? What is this meaningless of the client slash student? And how can I best assist them in creating their own meaning? Um, and again, this is it is a counseling theory, but it started as a philosophical movement. Um, so, it's kind of tied in with the philosophy, the Nietzsche's, um, which is a little bit different from the previous theories that we talked about, Rogers, Adler, and Freud. Viktor Frankl also talked about freedom, and he was famous for saying, the Statue of Liberty should be on one end, another statue should be on the other end, and the other statue should be responsibility. So for the existential, um, we're always looking at freedom with responsibility because um, we are free to make our choices, but we also have the condition of being responsible for those choices. And he mentioned that even in the concentration camps, when he was seeing people being murdered, he argued that they had the choice. They had the choice of dying in a dignified way. They had that freedom. So even in the worst of times, um, these really victims of the tragedy had the freedom to choose, what type of dignity they wanted to present themselves. And I think that's really powerful. I think that kind of speaks a lot to the existential theory, because, Frankl said it, suffering is part of life. Suffering is part of our existence. And we can interpret it in many different ways. Um, and part of an existential counselor is to help a client really interpret how that is being looked at. And again, that inauthenticity, that lack of awareness, that lack of subjectivity.